Hello, hello! Today we are going to do a painting of a cube. To get started with the drawing portion, I have my square paper, a pencil, an eraser, my ruler, and I have my pencil sharpener here and a little Tupperware that helps to keep all the shavings collected. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to plan my cube. I want it nice and big. If you make it teeny tiny, it's going to make it hard to do the painting part, so let's make it nice and big. First thing I'll do is I'll take my ruler and pretty much in the center, maybe off to the left or off to the right, with my ruler straight up and down, I'm going to do a line. I'm going to make it 4 inches tall. So I'm going to go 1, 2, going from big mark to big mark, 3, 4, and I'm going to make my mark. Notice that it's a little bit further down. This will give me room to kind of build the cube going up. So pretty much in the center of your paper, a little closer to the bottom, do a mark that's about 4 inches long. Okay. Next, I'm going to do the side of the cube. So from the bottom of my line, angled up, not super sharp, not flat, but angled up kind of in between. I'm going to do another line, and this one I'm going to do about 3 inches. So from 1, 2, 3, 3 big marks. So I went from 7 to 10, 1, 2, 3. I'll do a line there. Now, whatever length this is, for me it was 4 inches. Go ahead and measure your mark. I want to do the same length over here. So from this line that I just created, making sure that my ruler is straight up and down. This is probably the hardest part. You're going to do the same length. So I'm checking to make sure it's parallel here. I'm checking to make sure it's parallel here. Sometimes it's easier to have your ruler closer to the edge so I can visually see that these are parallel. I'm going to do a mark that's the same length as this. So mine was 4 inches there, so it'll be 4 inches here. Okay. And then you're going to connect them. This line should hopefully be the same length here. If not, it means that your lines aren't parallel, so you might want to correct them. But if they're close, more or less, then go ahead and connect those two. Okay, this is one side of the cube. Now let's do the other side of the cube. Okay, so I'm going to take my ruler, and from the bottom again I'm going to do a different line going up. This one I can have be the same length, or maybe I want this to be not a perfect box but like longer on one side. I'll do this one 2.5 instead of 3, and then making sure that this is the same length, so 4 inches again. Making sure that it is parallel with my paper, the edge of my paper, and then hopefully this connects. Yeah, pretty close, that'll do. So that this is the same length as that. Okay, so now you can see it looks kind of like an open book or a folded piece of paper, but hopefully you can kind of visualize that it's starting to be a box. Now we're going to do this back portion. So whatever length this line is, which was 2.5, I'm going to pull, or in the same line here, 2.5, I'm going to bring it over here and make a line that's 2.5 inches that's parallel with this. So rather than using the edge of my ruler, I'll put my mark in the middle of my ruler so that I can check that these are parallel. So I can visually say, okay, those are the same distance, right? The same distance all apart, all the way along. And then I'll make a mark that's 2.5, like that. Okay, and then whatever length this is, that was 3 inches. Hopefully, if these are parallel, same distance from each other all the way along, then this section should be 3 inches. And I'll tell you a secret, it's not perfect, but it's pretty close. So I'll go ahead and connect that. So this line, and this line are the same. This line, and this line are the same. This line, and this line are the same. So you should have 3 different lengths. 3, 3, 3, 2.5, 2.5, 2.5, 4, 4, 4. Even if your numbers aren't the same as mine, just make sure that they are consistent. And finally, I'm going to do a line on the back of my paper. This will indicate the edge of the table and kind of separate surface from background. And finally, I'm going to do a little shadow. So we're going to envision that our light is coming from above, maybe kind of coming from this direction. You can kind of pick. And then we'll do a shadow, envisioning that it's coming from this back corner. So a shadow that kind of goes off like that. Cool. All right, I think we're ready to paint. So I'm going to gather my paint supplies and meet you back here in just a moment. All right, welcome back. We are about to get started with our painting. I have my paper towel or rag, I have my brushes, I have some clean water, I have my palette. For this one, I'm going to do black and white. You can use a color if you'd like, but for me, I have black and white in my palette. And I also have my handy dandy scrap paper that can go under the edges when I want to. Okay, I am going to start by thinking about where my light is coming from. Well, I have a shadow off to the side like this, so that makes me think that it's going to be a little bit brighter on this side, and my light is going to be coming from above. That said, I can make that top area my lightest area. If my light is coming from above, it's going to be the brightest area. So I'm going to take some white and maybe just the slightest bit of black and make a nice bright value. And then I'm going to fill in this section using that value. Here I go. Okay, so I have my top surface. I am going to go ahead and do this next one. Since it's on the side of my object, it's not going to be receiving quite as much light. If my light is coming from above and the side, it just doesn't get as much. You can check on things in front of you. When I'm looking at this water cup, it's brighter here and the sides are a little bit darker. So even though this is on the side that's getting more light, it's going to be darker than that top surface. So I'm going to mix up a value that's a little bit darker than my top of my cube. Not super dark, I want this one to be the darkest, but a little bit darker. And I'm going to fill it in. So let's go ahead and get it started. Notice how I'm drawing the edge of my brush along those edges. If I have a flat brush, you can plant your hand and just drag it along that edge to get a nice clean edge. And also notice how I'm using one of the pointy brushes. It's a round with a pointy tip to sneak in here on those corners. Your big fat brush, the flat one, will not work as well. So give yourself the right tool for the moment. Use the little pointy brushes on those corners and then the flat brush to get those edges. Okay, I may have made it a little bit darker on the bottom. Just since the light is coming from above, it's possible that this section might be a little bit darker. You don't have to do that on yours. That's a little bit of like a fancy touch. So if you leave it just one value, that's okay. If you're looking for a little bit more of a challenge, maybe try to make it change from light to dark on this surface. Show you what I mean. Okay, this side is going to be the darkest of the three because if the light is coming here, it's getting the least amount of light. So I'm going to take my value that I had before. I don't want to make it all the way to black. That's a little dramatic, a little intense, but I do want to make it darker. So I'm going to come in here and paint this. Oops, needs to be a little bit darker. Paint this, which should be darker than that side. All right, go ahead. Okay, so now I have my top and my two sides. I can start thinking about the background. I could have the surface be lighter and maybe the background be darker. That might make it easier to show my shadow. If I make this really dark, the shadow will have a hard time showing up. So I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make this area behind my cube pretty dark, and then I'll make this surface a little bit lighter. So here I go, taking my time. I'll fill in this with like a black. Notice I have my paper behind it to make sure that I'm not getting a mess all over my table. And I can go pretty fast here where there's nothing at stake. But when you come up against your cube, slow down, take your time, plant your hands. You can get a nice steady line and just drag the side of your brush against the edge of your cube. All right, let's fill in that background. Okay, now that I have the background, I want to do my surface. Sorry, I was thinking really hard about that. Let's see, so I'll flip it around. And then I'm gonna do a really light gray for this, as close to white as I can get with a little hint of gray. I might let it get a little bit darker towards the bottom if that feels right, just so that the light will be separate from the dark, but then maybe there's a sense that the light is over here, so it's going to be darker at the bottom. Okay, here we go. Let me fill in this area with a very, very, very light gray. So I'm going to scoot this up a little bit. I keep getting some black paint off the edge of my paper. It's here on my scrap paper. And I don't mind it completely because I like how it's making this kind of murky textured gray. But just be aware that if you have wet paint on your scrap paper, it could get into your paint. And if you're not excited about that, maybe swap out this paper or wait for it to dry. Right, time for the shadow. Up here. The shadow is going to be a darker version of this color. So it's just going to be a darker gray. We talked about this in our sphere, I hope, that shadows are darkest where they start. So first I'm just going to make a darker gray. for my shadow color, but then I'm going to make sure that it's darkest where it starts. And where it starts is right up against this cube. So you can try this on your own. If you make a shadow on the table, notice that it's darker right where it begins, right up against the bottom of that object. And then as it moves away from the object, it's going to get lighter and lighter. So let's go ahead and get some value in. As I'm doing this, I'm realizing that my shadow color is very close to the color of the cube that I made, and that's going to make it confusing. So I'm actually going to lighten this a little bit so that we can differentiate or separate the cube from the shadow. Looks a little bit better. And shadow's going to get lighter as it moves away. Add a little bit of white in there. Okay, there we go. We have a cube. It's got a lightest side, a medium side, a darkest side. It's got a background. It's got a surface it's sitting on, and it has a shadow that goes from dark to light. If you wanted to play with this even more, I could make this part a little bit darker on the bottom, just to enhance the sense of volume. I could maybe make that shadow a little bit darker. I might play around and tinker with it a little bit more, but this gives you the basic idea of how to do a cube. All right, have fun, happy painting, and I'll talk to you soon.